This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed.
Welcome to our new News Club episode, What's Coming Up? I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Jodie Spears.
Jodie, we get a lot of feedback from Squizers that one of the most helpful things that we do is to corral information on what's going on in the day. We do that in Squiz Today with Squiz the Day, or in the weekly wrap with the week ahead. It's been a really foundational part of what we do from the very, very first newsletter that I sent in 2017. So we decided to create a little bit more space for this conversation. We'll do it on a Sunday when you're probably thinking about what might be coming up in the week and what it looks like. So here we are.
And how it will work is we'll pick out 2 to 3 notable things to talk about in a bit more depth. What's happening, why it's notable, what to look out for. Then we'll do a bit of a gallop through a full rundown of all the things that are on our calendar and our radar.
We picked 3 things coming up in the week ahead that we think are worth spending a couple of minutes on each. You'd have to think that the implementation of the Gaza peace plan will get a lot of attention.
You would think so, and it already is. We've covered the nuts and bolts of the agreement in yesterday's weekly wrap, so head one episode back if that's something that you want to get across a bit more. Yesterday, Israeli forces should have started withdrawing to what they're calling the yellow line. That's where they were positioned back in August. They will pull back from populated areas like Khan Yunis and Gaza City, but they're still in control of about 53% of Gaza's territory.
Yeah, and then on Monday and Tuesday, or Monday or Tuesday, we're not really sure yet, all of the 48 hostages who were taken from Israel should be released. 20 are believed to still be alive, and they will go through the Red Cross first, and then they will go essentially into Israeli custody for medical care. That's the first stop for them. The remains of those who have died will be returned with military honours.
There's a whole process around repatriation of those remains. The IDF has this special engineering unit, and that will inspect every coffin to make sure there are no explosives hidden in them. One thing to note is that the Israelis reckon that Hamas may not be able to find and return all of the remaining dead hostages in Gaza, so that's all to play out this week.
And on the Israeli side, about 250 Palestinian prisoners serving life sentences, plus another 1,700 Gazan residents who have been detained since the start of the war. They're going to be released as well. They're not releasing members of Hamas's special forces, if you want to put it that way, a really sort of special fighting unit who carried out that October 7 attack. They're also keeping custody of a guy called Marwan Barghouti, who has been locked up for a couple of decades in Israel. He's consistently topping the opinion polls of Palestinians about who should be the next president. So he's just someone to know.
Yeah, I've seen his name come up quite a bit this week. As for US President Donald Trump, he's planning a bit of a victory lap. He's expected to attend signing ceremonies in Egypt and Israel over the weekend, possibly addressing the Israeli parliament as well on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes out. It's a bit of movement. Things haven't quite been locked down. It's a bit of a dynamic situation, but certainly as far as we know, that's what's been planned.
Let's move on to 2 nations who are set to get new political leadership this week. We're talking about Japan and France. Where do you want to start?
Look, I reckon France, that's certainly where the week seemed to begin with this sort of turmoil in other countries' leadership. So Squiz Today covered the resignation of France's Prime Minister, a guy called Sébastien Lecornu. That was at the start of last week after his new cabinet was sworn in. It lasted about 24 hours before everything completely was in a mess. That new cabinet didn't go well with his own allies, so he became France's shortest ever serving Prime Minister at just 27 days. He's been the 5th Prime Minister in less than 2 years.
A big mess. It probably helps to explain a little bit the relationship between the President and the PM in France's system of government. The President is the head of state, holds significant powers. They're the one that you usually hear about. Those powers include appointing the Prime Minister and presiding over the Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister, as the head of government, is responsible for domestic policy and more of that sort of day-to-day administration.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister is generally from the party that has the most seats in Parliament. Not always the case, but generally that's how it works. They're usually from the same party as the president, but politics has been a bit tumultuous in France of late. If they are of the same party, the Prime Minister and the President generally dominates. He's got the stronger political, sort of ranking in the party. If not, the Prime Minister gains a bit more influence over internal affairs.
Yeah, and the situation in France in the last couple of years has been really fraught. The President Emmanuel Macron's centrist bloc lost its majority, and that forced some awkward alliances, leaving Prime Ministers in a bit of a political minefield. So we're on the lookout for the announcement of a new PM. Who'd want to take that on?
Yeah, good luck.
The poisoned chalice.
Good luck to them. So that's France. On to Japan, where they've had their own political chaos this week and actually ongoing for quite some time. They're getting a new Prime Minister this week too.
Yeah, Sanae Takaichi is her name. She's set to be confirmed as Japan's first female leader on Wednesday. Last week, she won leadership of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party after 2 failed attempts, and she's expected to formally be made Japan's leader when their parliament meets this week.
It's a huge moment for Japan, of course, getting their first female leader, but it is being noted internationally as a breakthrough. She, though, isn't exactly a feminist trailblazer. She's a protege of Shinzo Abe, and she's seen as pretty hardline and ultra-conservative, particularly on social issues.
Yeah, she talks about improving gender balance in her cabinet and offering family-friendly tax breaks and things like that. But she's also opposed things like allowing married couples to keep separate surnames. That's a bit of a given here. I have my own surname. I've never really thought about changing it. She's also against permitting a woman to become the emperor. So she's also taking over at quite a tricky time in the country.
Yeah, so Japan's economy is really struggling still with inflation. Its yen is weak. There's a reason why quite a few Aussies are heading to Japan at the moment, because going to the US and Europe is a bit difficult with the dollar exchange. It's pretty good for us with Japan. Also, living costs are high. Public frustration is high, and the ruling party's reputation has really been battered around in the last bit of time over corruption scandals. Plus, she's got foreign policy headaches as well. There's a lot going on there with that same dance that we're doing. United States, China. For Japan, South Korea is a bit tricky as well. But President Trump is due to visit Tokyo soon. That'll be her really first big diplomatic test.
Another very important thing to note, Claire, she was a drummer in a heavy metal band and was said to travel to gigs carrying multiple sets of drumsticks because she often snapped them with the sheer forcefulness of her drumming. So I don't know what that says about her political style, but...
Yeah, certainly lots of comparisons being made about her political style, that she's pretty hard. So she goes hard clearly on the drums and in politics too. To round us up, let's talk about Australian netball. The Constellation Cup starts in Melbourne on Friday.
Yeah, that's that comp between Australia and New Zealand, the Diamonds and the Silver Ferns. When it comes to fabled rivalries in sport, this one's one of the fiercest. The Diamonds want to reclaim the Constellation Cup after the Silver Ferns won it for the first time since 2021 last year.
Yeah, the rivalry between us is pretty fiery, but this year we've got a bit of extra sort of energy around the Diamonds, and off the court there's been a bit going on. The sport's gone through some really big changes of late, and it's actually had some overdue wins as well. So just last month, Netball Australia and the Players Association agreed to a bit of a landmark pay deal that gives Diamonds players and that really sort of elite squad a share of the sport's revenue for the first time.
Yeah, it's a 3-year collective agreement that includes a 40% rise plus bonuses tied to sponsorships, broadcast and event success. It also adds new investment in wellbeing, career transition and alumni programs. It's being hailed as a turning point for women's sport, and the sort of deal that recognises the Diamonds not just as athletes but the product that drives the game's commercial success.
A big shift in tone from a few years ago when Netball Australia was really battling some big financial troubles. There was also a messy sponsorship saga. We talked about that on the weekly wrap in the past. There was a lot of bad news around netball there for a while. Since then, the game's been rebuilding, connecting again with the grassroots. Of course, it's one of the biggest participatory sports in the country, so there's a lot of people who are interested in it. The Diamonds have been taking also test matches to regional cities like Wollongong and Adelaide. Adelaide's not a regional city, it's a capital, of course, I should say.
Be careful.
Yeah, be very careful with our South Australian friends. It's also where thousands of fans have been able to turn out and see them live. Attendance is really strong.
Yeah, great vibe at those games. Netball Australia says that's part of showing that the sport isn't just surviving, it is growing and it's reaching new communities. So for the details on the Constellation Cup, the series kicks off on Friday at Melbourne's John Cain Arena before it heads to Sydney, and then it's across the ditch for 2 games, with the series wrapping up on October 29.
Yeah, go the Diamonds. Let's get across the run of the news for the week. We do like to gallop through this full list, so here we go. Giddy up.
Gallop's a good word for it. Starting today, we have the Bathurst 1000 kicking off at Mount Panorama from 10:45 this morning. That is obviously near Bathurst in New South Wales. Big deal. For those who don't know, it's a 1,000-kilometre touring car endurance race, basically Australia's biggest motorsport event. And they've been racing around that mountain since 1963.
It was probably way too late in my life that I realised that 1,000 part of Bathurst 1,000 is 1,000 kilometres.
I'm with you.
Drive. But now we all know. From this afternoon as well, 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, there's a bit more rugby league for you to get around after last weekend.
The season was over, but no.
NRL Grand Final. So the Prime Minister's 13 teams, the men's and the women's, they're playing in Port Moresby. It's the women's match first, then the men at 4 p.m. Australia's been using these sort of sporting exchanges with PNG as part of our whole sort of Pacific diplomatic efforts. They've been doing that for years. It's not a new thing. Sport is this really sort of soft power tool, particularly, again, we're trying to counter Chinese influence in the region.
Really interesting crossover between sport and politics, and the PNGers love a bit of rugby league. Australia also takes on India in the Women's ODI Cricket World Cup at 8:30 tonight, Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Both teams are undefeated so far. Australia beat Pakistan last week, and they had their match against New Zealand abandoned due to the weather. India is also unbeaten. They've taken down Sri Lanka and Pakistan, so should be pretty spicy.
Yeah, Beth Mooney is the one who's really been a standout for Australia in the World Cup so far. She's been carrying the batting order. So good luck to her and to the whole team. On to Monday. So the World Bank and the IMF annual meetings, they kick off in Washington, D.C. They run through to the end of the week, so there's quite a few things happening there. The IMF's managing director is Kristalina Georgieva, and she gave a preview just a couple of days ago saying, about the global economy, it's doing, and this is her quote, better than feared, but worse than needed. She says that uncertainty is the new normal.
So global public debt is expected to exceed 100% of nations' GDP by 2029. That means that finance ministers and central bankers will have a whole lot to discuss there. Also, Monday at 10 a.m. in Melbourne, there's the sentencing for Ebony Bell. That was over an assault on Senator Lydia Thorpe at the MCG during the AFL Dreamtime game back in May.
That was a big news story when that happened. So, yeah, that's a rounding of that corner. South by Southwest, or as we write, I sort of see it as a word more than actually say it, SXSW. The Sydney event gets underway on Monday too. It runs for a week. It's a big sort of creative innovation festival, conferences, music, film screenings. The Sydney event has Edgar Wright coming this year. He's showing footage from his new film. He's a British filmmaker who's known for his very sort of distinctive visual style, also sort of comedic, a bit of dark comedy. One of the movies that you might know of his is Baby Driver.
Yeah, that Kevin Spacey film, quite a distinctive kind of style. There has been a bit of criticism around South by Southwest. The New South Wales government is paying $12.5 million for the rights to host this Sydney version of that event that started in Austin, Texas. Some in the local tech and innovation community are not happy about that. The criticism is about damage to homegrown events, price gouging, basically exploiting the community that the festival's supposed to be serving.
Yeah, that's certainly what the critics of that event say. Also saw some criticism. There was some speculation that media outlets are being asked to agree to write 2 articles on the event before they get a press pass.
It's not really how things usually work here, is it?
And I don't know if it's true or not, but certainly the one thing I know, and Jody, you will know this well, our media isn't very easy to push around.
No, absolutely not.
So look, we'll see how that goes through the week. It'll be a big thing in Sydney. Tuesday, the Guardian's Australian Bird of the Year voting enters its final announcement stage. So the voting closes at 6 a.m. on Wednesday morning.
Plenty of twitchers watching that one. The tawny frogmouth has been the bridesmaid 3 times running. It came second in 2019, 2021, 2023. So maybe it'll get there this time. There's this whole campaign happening to finally get that one across the line. Yeah. So we'll find out on Thursday when the winner is announced.
Look, if it needs inspiration, Chunk from Fat Bear Week.
Exactly.
Won it after 4 runners up. So it could be the tawny
get
frogmouth
there in the end.
Here. Also on Tuesday, we're heading into AGM season. So Telstra's holding their AGM in Melbourne. That's from 9:30 a.m. Wednesday. Commonwealth Bank and Origin Energy are both having their AGMs. There are so many things happening in those sectors when you look at telco, banking, energy, and they are 3 leading companies in those spaces. So I'd reckon there'll be a bit of news out of those meetings.
Yeah, you'd think so, particularly with the boards and the execs fronting the shareholders to answer their questions. Thursday at the National Press Club, Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke is speaking. He's handling a lot at the moment: immigration, home affairs, cyber security, the arts portfolios. So plenty that he could be addressing. He is going to be outlining Labor's approach to home affairs, and in the last few days he's been dealing with that controversial return of the 2 women and 4 children from Syrian refugee camps last month.
Yeah, those press club events, the media, it is a press club, so the media goes and half of it is journos asking questions, so you would have to think that that is probably top of the list for Tony Burke to ask about that. Also Thursday, Australia plays Bangladesh Women's World Cup one day in India. Friday, the A-League season kicks off. It's Adelaide United versus Sydney FC. That's at 6:30 p.m. in Adelaide. Then Brisbane Roar takes on Macarthur at Suncorp Stadium in Queensland. That's at 8 p.m.
Friday, our time, Jonathan Rinderknecht, the man accused of lighting the fire that tore through California's Pacific Palisades in January, is due to appear in court after he was arrested in Florida on Tuesday over threatening to burn his sister's house down. He's currently being held without bail on the grounds that he's a danger to the community and could be a flight risk. In the US, arson carries a minimum sentence of 5 to 20 years, but in a fire as destructive as this one, he could be facing a whole lot longer.
Moving to Saturday and 2 p.m, the World Triathlon Finals are being held in Wollongong. They're following what the Olympic distances are. There's many sorts of triathlons that you can do, but this is the Olympic distances. So that's a 1.5 kilometre swim, a 40 kilometre bike ride, a 10 kilometre run. It's just not hard enough to do a 10K run on its own or a 1.5K swim. Like, put it all together.
I reckon I could maybe pull off one of those legs, definitely not 3. To finish us off, it's the Radio National Top 100 Books Countdown, which is right up my alley.
And look, ABC is on a bit of a tear on this one. So the Triple J's hottest 100 Australian songs made so many headlines this year. It became a bit of a moment of the year, actually. Radio National have come up with their own concept. It's a countdown of books. We were talking about it. You can play a song pretty easily on the radio. I don't know how you do a sort of little summary of 100 books.
No, read the blurb of them all. It might get a bit dull. Anyway, it makes good Facebook content, I think. I'd like to see the list.
Absolutely. And it's over the weekend, so Saturday into Sunday. That's definitely something for bookworms to get rather excited about.
Absolutely.
Jodie, that wraps us up for the whole thing on what's coming up this week.
Don't tell us that you're not prepared for the week ahead.
Exactly. But really keen for you to tell us how you found this. If you've got any feedback for us, just drop us a line at hello@thesquiz.com.au. We'd love to hear from you. Have a great rest of the weekend.
See you next week.